Hi guys, Simon Trezellian here. Sorry, I've been offside for a while. Lots going on, and I've been a little ill, and a few other things going on. So it's been a challenge. Like a lot of people are being challenged right now. But I thought it was time to get back on the horse, get back in front of the video, because there's a lot of stuff going on right now. I wanted to talk today about the decreasing blue line, the police. I've had a lot of interaction, mostly very positive, with the police throughout my years as military intelligence, which of course, most of the time you're aligned with the police. It's a military action in support of the local police. So you get to work alongside these guys and you get to see the mindset of them. And I think that it's worthy of taking a look at that as to who they are. But first of all, let's have a look at how this all came about, this whole element of the law and upholding the law. And we can work this all the way back to the Ten Commandments. All of our laws are based upon the Ten Commandments, bar none. And it was the interpretation of those Ten Commandments that really came into this whole element of the law, then the enforcement of the law. And we've had everyone in trying to enforce the law, from the Spanish Inquisition to the Knights Templar to pretty much everybody else. But when you actually look at, say, the law in respect to America, for instance, we had the Wild West, and people talk about the Wild West as an analogy of lawlessness. Because people were just going out and doing their own thing, and unless someone actually came up to stop them, it was pretty much anarchy. And this is what we've got right now. People could go out and just freely murder and steal and rape and rustle cattle and all this type of thing, until such time as a lawman came in, who was empowered by the administration to exact some form of retribution and some form of law. And we saw this in the old cowboy films, the lone lawman with the white hat, taking on the guy with the big moustache and the black hat. So we got conditioned in regards to how we look at the lawman with the badge and the gun. And that created the whole elements of sheriffs and marshals. From that time, the law became an industry because they realized that laws are open to interpretation, and therefore then birthed the formation of the lawyer cult, and therefore judges as well, sitting in judgment to interpret those laws that were placed, and it's become a massive industry from there on. So the police were designed as an enforcement arm to be able to make sure that the laws that were enacted in democratic society were largely enforced, or people breaking those laws were then brought to justice and summarily confined, or whatever they used to do. So the police are a very, very different mindset to, say, the military, and we're starting to see the military coming on the streets now. Having been in the military for most of my adult life, I know that it's a very different mindset to that of the police. So when you join the military, whether it be the Army, Navy, Air Force, or the Marines, you tend to go in there, they tend to be more patriotic. They tend to go in there from the whole element of wanting to serve the country. Whereas what I have found with the police is that they tend to attract people that want to serve sometimes the community, but also there is a bit of an internal power thing there. They like to have power, and of course giving someone a badge and a gun in their community does give them power over their peers. And this has created some problem areas with communities who sometimes see these bad apples, and there are bad apples, just as much as there are good people in there as well. And even when you went to war, the people that stayed behind and became the police, this is where I think they actually get the word flatfoots from. It's not just about them beating the beat, but also that if you had flat feet, you couldn't go into the military. So if you were of that age, then you stayed behind and you became a policeman. So what I found in dealing with the police is that they tended to be people that do have, there's a lot of ego around that. And you have to have that. You have to have confidence. You know, when they go to the police academy, they're taught how to speak and in what register to speak. You know, so most human beings, you see, respond to a deeper voice, you know, which has more authority to it, because you've been brought up hopefully by your father and he's got a deeper voice than you, and therefore, you know, when you hear that deeper voice, you tend to respond in a far more positive way than if someone with a higher voice. Imagine being stopped by a policeman and the policeman goes, "Do you realise you were doing 30 in a 25 zone?" You know, you're not going to have the same degree of respect with that type of person. So there is this tendency within the actual police force itself to project something, an air of confidence and power that sometimes is not necessarily naturally given. I have found, unfortunately, that unlike some of the other emergency services, and it's interesting, isn't it, that we'd call it the fire service, the ambulance service, and the police force. So that is the real difference. And when you consider it, think about the last time when you saw a fire engine, you know, in your rearview mirror. You know, you hear the sirens, you see the big red fire engine, big shiny thing, and you just want to get out of the way because you know that they're going to go and save someone. They're actually going to do something really, really positive. You know, even if it's getting a cat out of a tree, they're doing something positive. They're providing a service, and people respect that service. Women love that service. This is why there's this thing about firemen, you know. This is why they make calendars with firemen, but not calendars with policemen. You know, so there is this thing about the heroism that comes from being within the fire service. With an ambulance service, when you see an ambulance go past or you hear the siren of an ambulance, you know, my initial thing is, oh my God, you know, someone is desperate right now. I'm going to get out of the way, and, you know, by the grace of God, there go I, you know. But when you see a police car and a police siren and the blue lights, you immediately look down at your speedometer to see if you've done something wrong. There is this automatic feeling that, oh, I'm in the shit, it must be me. Because you get this feeling that this police force are coming to subdue you. And you know that any interaction with them is really not going to be positive at all. Anything you say will be taken down and maybe used in evidence against you. They even tell you that. They even tell you that in the Miranda rights. So nothing that you're ever going to say to a policeman is ever going to be positive for you at all. And I think that then creates a divide between the communities that they serve and the police force, unfortunately. And when you have this thing with like the ghettos, you know, because there have been ghettos, there are no-go areas. We're seeing this now. The police, unfortunately, act like an occupying force as opposed to a service. You know, the fire engines stay in the fire brigade station until there's a fire. Then they respond. They're first responders. You know, the ambulance doesn't go around looking for people to be ill. They stay where they are and then they respond, you know, when there is a problem. The police go out trawling around like sharks in the community looking for trouble. And if you look for trouble, you're going to find it. And I think that poses a real problem, especially when you start patrolling areas where you know geographically or socially there are going to be problems. And a lot of those problems are going to be in the ghettos. Okay, so we need to then understand why there is a ghetto. Why are there predominantly black ghettos? Well, it's because for 200 years, the black population has not had the same degree of opportunities and success as some of the white neighborhoods. And that's just a fact of life. It's just not a racist comment. It's just fact of life. So when you take away people's opportunities, they still have to live, they still have to pay the bills, so they tend to gravitate to the more shady areas of making money, and that comes into drugs and it comes into crime, and therefore it's a never-ending spiral going down, you know, where you get more and more crime, and therefore you need more and more policing, more and more enforcement, more and more people going to jail, and therefore more and more criminals being created. I mean, my God, I mean, what do you expect? Of course it's going to go that way. So unless we actually have some fundamental change in the way that policing is done and it becomes a more responsive service, I don't think we're going to have any real change. So in order to be able to create that, the police have to gain some element of trust. So people want to know that when they pick up a phone and say 911, I need the police, they want to know that they're going to survive that encounter. They want to know that they're not themselves going to be arrested, or their own homes are going to be searched as a knock-on, or any of these things. And therefore I think that some real fundamental thought needs to go into how we actually do policing. And that all comes down to selection of who you have as police people. We need to have a greater selection so that it represents the community of which they serve. So you're going to need that diversity. And therefore, if you don't have trust in the community, then people aren't going to join if they're black or brown, or, because all of a sudden now they're going to be marginalized by their own communities that they want to serve. So it becomes a problem area. So therefore, without fundamental change, you're not going to get the trust of that community. Now, I've given this quite a bit of thought. And, you go to a police academy, when you consider the amount of training that a fireman has, or the amount of training an ambulance person has, and my daughter's going through this at the moment. She's becoming a paramedic. It's a long training. Whereas, conversely, when you go to a police academy, it's like 8 weeks and you're out with a gun and you're patrolling the streets, as a rookie, and therefore a lot of the rookies are part of the problem because they don't know how to respond. They haven't been placed in that situation. I found throughout all my experience, the most effective policemen have actually served in the military before. They're very well versed with weapons. They're very self-disciplined. They understand, the need for, a more measured response in some ways, because they have experience, and experience counts, especially when you're trying to, enforce laws. So my idea would be that if you're going to join the police force, let's sieve out the bad apples from the beginning. Let's sieve out the ones that just want to be Dirty Harry, that want to just get out there with a badge and a gun, and be out there saying, freeze motherfucker. What I would do, if I was in charge of this situation, is that I would weed that out by making it mandatory that they spend the first 2 years as in a probationary sense. So they go through the academy, they understand all of these things, they're given a uniform, they're shown how to use weapons, they're shown about the law and how that law works, and then they go to a probationary station where they're not put on the beat. They're actually put in an office somewhere where they process a lot of the information that the beat cops come back. The beat cops come back with their, with their evidence, give it to someone else, just like a real estate agent. They just go there, get the listing, give it to someone that processes that. So they will then get to see the justice system. From an administrative point of view. They get to see the problem areas of a beat cop, and they get to process, towards the prosecutor's office, the crimes that they see. Therefore, they're going to see trends, they're going to see a lot of experience, they're going to see what crimes are committed, what crimes can be prosecuted, and I think it will give them a really, really good understanding of what actually goes on the streets. In fact, if they made it 3 years, they could actually do a criminal justice degree during that time. Imagine every single cop on the streets having a degree in criminal justice, so they understand the whole system, from committing the crime to incarceration. I mean, how much more experience could there possibly be? Only because they're seeing that, they're seeing the whole thing. By all means, put them in the jails so they process prisoners, so they understand what a prisoner is. They understand what it is like to confine someone. Because so then they're not on the streets having to make deathly decisions there and there. So it gives them a much more grounded experience, a much better framework over that 3 years. Once they qualify after 3 years, they understand fully about the system. By all means, then put them on the streets, because now they have a better understanding. Now, I feel that there's some elements of the police force that could be disbanded. I don't think, for instance, that drug enforcement works. I'm going to do a whole thing on drugs later on. But certainly these specialist groups become real problematic. You know, I feel that, for instance, SWAT teams, they should be staffed with former military. Because these guys have actually been in combat. You know, you shouldn't have a militarized police. There's no need for them to have MRAP vehicles and grenade launchers and these literally weapons of war. You know, you can't just give them to civil police and expect them not to use them. You know, the whole point when you have these things, they put sheriff on it. Oh, let's go use it. So they use it for everything. Every time they go and serve a warrant, there's a bloody armoured car outside. That doesn't help anyone. It doesn't serve the community. It doesn't embolden trust. It actually just makes them look weak because they have to turn up in an MRAP just to serve a warrant. Are you kidding me? You know, so I do believe that putting experts in, especially in domestic violence, you know, instead of actually just sending social workers, do both. Send the police by all means. They're there as a safety cordon, but you put the social worker in the same way a hostage negotiation. You don't leave that to beat cops. You leave that to an unarmed guy who's really, really good at hostage negotiation. You get them in there and the police form a cordon. They're a protective measure at that point. Because, you know, it's the often side of thing. If you see every problem as a nail, then really all you've got is the hammer. Then you're going to use that every single time. If you've only got the gun and the badge and that's all you can use, well, guess what's going to happen? You know, you don't need to be a brain surgeon to understand that. So, and I think they need to be much, much more clear in regards to SWAT teams. Everyone's got a SWAT team. You know, when you look at even the Department of Fisheries and the Department of Libraries has their own SWAT team. Would you believe that? You know, so over the Obama administration, they got a lot of these weapons coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they just sold them to the police force at really, really cheap rates. So I think that's created a real problem. I'm going to do another video on what I believe is going to be the solution for that in regards to the creating of militia groups within the actual community for the community. But right now, there's a lot of talk about defund the police. I mean, what a stupid concept. But we do need to reform the police. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. We need to bring them into the community. We need to staff them with community people. And we need to give them greater support in some of the areas where they lack. As I said about the selection, it needs to be far broader than we currently have. And I think that within the specialist groups, there needs to be some real understanding about what they actually do. Certainly getting rid of the no-knock thing. I mean, I understand why they would want to do that. But, I mean, they just get it wrong so many times. It's just not funny. So I do feel that they've done well to almost like abolish the no-knock system where they literally just go in and half the time the person isn't there. Someone invariably gets shot because they've got armed people coming through the window. Even if you're a criminal, there are armed people come through the window. You're going to shoot back, and at that point you've then got a gunfight, no matter what. So that needs to be dealt with as well. So I do feel that that all of this situation at the moment has brought out a lot of questions. Very few people actually have answers. Just defunding and abolishing the police is not going to work. And I thought it was interesting the other day when you had that politician out in Washington, D.C., and she got attacked by this lunatic, in women's clothing, and she's standing on the place which has written on the road, defund the police, and she goes, "Where's the police when you need them?" I mean, talk about irony. So defunding the police is a non-starter. Reforming the police, I think, is an imperative. We need to have a police service. It needs to be serving the community. It needs to be responsive to need, and it doesn't need to be going out there like an occupying force. It needs to garner real trust with that community and provide a service. We pay for this. We pay for them. So we should be able to determine what type of service that we require from them. And I feel it just needs to have people with integrity, that are fair, that can actually make decisions on the ground that may not just be black and white, you've committed a crime, therefore this. I remember when I was a kid, PC Daisy, okay? PC Daisy was his large policeman. Well, I think everyone looks large when you're about 5 or 6 years old. I was stealing an apple from a tree at some point, and he came up to me with his big helmet on, and he got me by the ear, and he started taking me back to my home by the ear. And it scared the shit out of me. And I tell you what, it made me a law-abiding citizen. He didn't have to cuff me, kneel on me, restrict my breathing, beat the shit out of me, or point a gun at me. He just needed to be a strong person in the community that I could respect and look up to. And I looked up to that guy for 6 or 7 years before he actually died, just before I joined the army. That is the type of policeman that creates a memory. It created a memory for me. And that, I think, is what a lot of policemen would like to think, as opposed to, being someone that everyone fears and everyone dislikes. And therefore you gravitate towards your own little clan because no one else will speak to you. What a horrible situation to be in life. So those are some of my ideas in regards to the ever-thinning blue line. I'm going to be doing some other videos over the next few days, hopefully. And so that is me. This is Simon Trizelian. Still going to be part of the Lockdown Chronicles because we're still in lockdown. And so thank you for listening. Share this. Let's get it out there and make any comments that you wish to make. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye now.